The best part of my relationship with the clinic is to find that the lawyers here are specialized, who have a great deal of scholarship and expertise, but also understand the particular needs of the communities that they serve, the issues that we need to resolve for the broader community. So, for example, the issue of head tax redress, of no concern to anybody else but the Chinese community. And indeed, within the Chinese community, only parts of it was interested. So you had to have a clinic that understood and lawyers that understood why it was still important to seek redress over many years, who would sustain that effort over some 20 or 30 years in order to get the kind of redress result that we got. These larger issues are particular to a community, but in the resolution of it, it became an important passage for this government and this history. So now governments can be proud of the fact that they provided redress for 62 years of legislated discrimination. I look at it as a gift that our community gave to the government of the day, that they could get a political success with hardly any effort on its own. They practically only had to bend over and pick it up. They reached out and had an impact for themselves within a community in Canada that they never would have gotten otherwise. But for the community, what was fabulous was that people who were always excluded from the institutions that governed them were, for the first time ever, actually getting something they needed. We had arranged for families of head taxpayers to come with us to Ottawa to listen to the Prime Minister give the parliamentary apology. And until the very last day, we weren't sure they actually were going to do that because they had a lot of issues. And I was sitting there, and although I have been in Parliament before as a guest, I could see around me some 300 older Chinese Canadians who'd never been in the House of Commons. They had no idea there was a House of Commons. And here they were, sitting there, and then the Prime Minister stood up and said, Canada apologizes, and actually broke protocol in the House of Commons, saying it in Chinese. And there was this, buzz that rose up in the galleries. And you know that at that moment, and over time, they realized they were part of history in the making. It was their Prime Minister, whether they elected him or not, saying to them on behalf of the government of Canada, an apology, right, to the collective, and probably to each of them personally, because of course, these were all families who had a family member pay the head tax. And so this was like a generation in the making. And again, these were people who in their ordinary lives never would have thought that they would have direct access to the institutions of power. Mm-hmm. And here they were.
I mean, it was a magical experience riding that Redress Express, that train from Union Station to Ottawa, and then witnessing from the galleries the parliamentary apology. At the same time, it was somewhat bittersweet. I didn't know at the time how quite to take it. There was something missing, and the missing part, of course, was that it took over 20 years. It took over 20 years, and literally thousands of head taxpayers and their spouses or widows had passed away, including my own grandparents. And so that was the sadder part, that great, we have this acknowledgement, we have redress, including financial redress for the few hundred, probably the dozen or so surviving head taxpayers, and then the few hundred remaining widows.
And so, yeah, it was a bit bittersweet that those other individuals were not there to see it, but the families did. And that was important. There were so many stories of families who for the first time heard about the head tax because the head taxpayer and their family was too ashamed to talk about it. I mean, you don't spend a lot of time in advocacy over regret what you look at is, what was achieved, what was the long-term effect of this event. And I think the long-term effect was family members and generations of Chinese Canadians will remember this as something that happened, that had meaning in their families, and meaning for Chinese Canadians generally for generations to come.